Now let's build the best part of the application, which is actually seeing the messages getting synced and then send and receive those messages through HTTP and WebSockets. So that's what we're going to do right now in this episode. So let's see where we are right now. We have this screen, everything is ready, but then we don't have any messages synced. So first thing first, because I don't have a database in place right now, I'm not going to sync, but then every time we are going to come to a chat room, I'm going to fetch all those messages and then I'm going to show that here. Once we have the database, we can maybe implement something like a syncing feature at that point. So right now it's going to be a fetch. So for that, let me go to my service. Already have the chat room service, which is more like for create, but then I can create something for fetching all the messages specific to a chat room, let's say. So that's what I'm going to do. Let me bring in that chatroom service. So I have a chatroom API right now available, and I think I can bring it through the messaging API. I don't have anything called a message API. I'm going to create something called as a message API. So let me bring that. First thing, let me create that. Message API as a protocol. Message API, include it within the service, and then I'm going to have first thing as a fetch itself. Message API. The API is going to have a function, so it needs all the it needs Rx Swift because it's going to return a single. So for that, I'm going to create a function called fetch messages. This is going to bring in all the messages using the chatroom ID, which is string, and it's going to return a chat room. So the chat room is going to carry all the message information. So we can just fetch all the chat room for this chat room ID and use that chat room to get all the messages within it. So that's how I have designed my API. The API. So this I'm going to implement within. So one refactoring I have done to an existing calls is that I have just kept one chat room service for everything, and then I'm just implementing all the functions required for that within this. So that way whatever I'm doing is I'm just creating extensions to it. So I'm going to follow that to an extent right now. I'm going to create chatroom service is already there, but then I'm going to create an extension to it called chatroom service, chatrooms service plus message API. So that this is where I'm going to implement that API. So that's going to create a file, and all that I'm going to do is to create an extension called chatrooms service and going to implement that message API over here. So this hopefully is public because I need it to be exposed, and that in turn is going to ask me to implement it. So it's going to be a function implementation, and we need to have this endpoint defined within our import Rx Swift, and I need the models. So I have done some improvements to my existing code where earlier if I needed a single, I had told you this can become like an exercise for you. So I have already done that from my end, where instead of doing this all the time, return single or return create that one, I have already created something at my end. So I'm going to use that. So before that, let me check whether I have the HTTP function, HTTP service to bring all the messages. So I don't have it. I'm gonna create a message API for that. Within the HTTP service, I'm gonna bring in a message HTTP router. So create that. This is going to take care of all the creation of a message fetching all the messages and all that. Message HTTP router is what I'm going to create. It's going to be again an enum message HTTP router, and it's going to have first thing called fetch messages, and it's going to use the chatroom ID to fetch its messages. Chatroom ID is I'm going to fetch all the messages for a chatroom ID, and I'm going to extend this extension of this message HTTP router, and it's going to implement reactive HTTP router. This in turn will ask me to implement a set of functions and properties. So base URL is going to remain the same like earlier. It's going to get the messages from 8080 endpoint itself, not the endpoint, and it can also have a header like this. Content type application JSON is my header, so it requires Alamofire so that you don't get all that error. And path is going to be switch case itself, and then it's going to be fetch messages. It's going to use this path, let chatroom ID, and path is going to be return chatrooms / chatroom ID / I guess that's it, and it's going to fetch all the messages for that chatroom. So it's messages, chatroom ID messages is my endpoint for this fetching all messages. And then method is going to be switch self. For this one, fetch messages, it's going to be get return. Default is not needed, get rid of that. Headers, all that is defined. For fetch I don't need a body, so I'm ignoring that for the time being. I guess that's enough for me. Body is not needed, and I also need that request interceptor which we created. Request interceptor, which otherwise it's not going to get you any response. Request interceptor is what I'm going to include. So it's going to be the same JWT interceptor. So it's nothing but if you already seen this, it's having that access token, refresh token, and everything. It's going to adapt. If access token authorization, it's going to pass, and if it's going to fail with 401, it's going to retry once after it has fetched the refresh token with this function. The request which failed, let's say if you are fetching messages, if it fails, it's going to retry at that point to get all the messages again. So it's the refresh is always working, because even now my server is only supporting like within 5 minutes. If you don't refresh, it expires in 5 minutes, the JWT token. So that's how it is right now for me. So I have HTTP router ready. Now I can use this to fetch my messages, because fetch message function is already there. So before that I'm going to bring in whatever I told here, like instead of return single.create, I'm gonna actually do something which can do this stuff somewhere else. Return disposables dot create. This is how a normal structure looks like for create, even for an observable. So I'm going to because even after this you need to call the single. If there is an error, what you need to do, all that you need to take care. So instead I'm going to introduce an RX version. I'm going to keep it within the utility section. I'm going to create something called as rx Swift plus extensions, where I'm going to have all the extensions required. Extensions utility. So obviously it needs to have a reference to RX Swift and RX Cocoa. I hope I have those added. I don't think I have, so let me add that. Include all those. Carthage, build, iOS, RX Cocoa, and Swift is what I'm going to extend over here. I'm hoping whatever extension I'm creating already might be existing in RX right now in the RX library, the updated ones. But then just going to show you how you can extend any of your RX function if you are like a RX person who loves to work on RX. Then for a couple of things I'm going to create extension, public extension. First one is I'm going to extend observable type, where like I said, the create, I'm going to call a function. I'm going to create something called as a create observable function, which is nothing but it can have that return observable.create. You call observable.onNext on receiving a signal, and if you want to end instantly, you call onCompleted, which is nothing but a single. So single happens like you receive a signal, you complete your observable work. That's what a single is. So but then I'm going to start with the basic structure. So I'm just going to call it T, observable type, like generic type, and then I'm going to pass a block over here. Block is nothing but just a closure, and that closure function is going to be if you access it, it gives you T. That's how it is going to be. So, and it's going to return an observable type of T. Like once you start using it, you'll get to know what I'm trying to do. Block of this type, and it returns an observable type. So whatever whatever is being created inside, let's say T is what is getting created. Let's say you are creating you are fetching all the messages. In this case, it's going to be Chatroom, which is the response. So Chatroom is what you get a response from the server. So once you parse it, you need to create that Chatroom into an observable type. Let's say a single or an observable of single or observable of Chatroom. So this is what your type is T. Maybe it can be Chatroom, it can be a message or anything. That's what this generic type is. Whatever you're trying to do is you're transforming your whatever you received, let's say as a server response, which is after passing you might get the Chatroom codable type. You need to convert that into an observable type. That's what is happening here. So this create observable is going to take care of that. I'm gonna do the same stuff like we used to do, create, and I'm gonna say this is of type T. Whatever I'm going to return is of type T, and this is going to be a observable. Do I call it I think I can call it an observer, and same stuff like disposables dot create as what. So this is what I had been creating earlier in every section. Instead I'm just moving it to a function here. And what happens if it's like something which does not throw any error, I can just say observer dot on next. I just pass this T, which is of which is like the element which I am passing. So this T is going to come back through this block. So block, if you access block function, you access, you get T. So that's what is going to happen. Block, access it returns T. So observer accepting type T is here. So this block, when you use it, you will get to know, because you are going to pass something as a block to this function create observable. Block is nothing but opening and closing braces. Whatever you pass inside is going to be that block. So once you access it, it creates a T type. So that's going to happen here. And then observer dot on completed is what you will call to complete this signal. So this is more or less like a single itself, because single works like this. You get a signal, you end it instantly. But then within the block, maybe it can loop and do some lots of stuff and then complete it. Only after that it may complete like this. It's like sequentially it's doing its job. So this is my basic thing which is needed to create an observable. Even I can now extend this one. Like if I want to, let's say, do it for a single, this is now for an observable. If I need to have it for a single, I can do the same stuff. Like I can again create an extension, public extension which is going to be for primitive sequence type, where so the primitive sequence type is again inherited from observable type itself, where it's called as the different traits which is available with observable. Observable is the base type for starting a reactive programming RX Swift or even any programming language. But then in iOS RX Cocoa, they have created it as different traits. Single is kind of a trait which is more or less like a wrapper around your observable. Like it does something, and single is nothing like I said, on, next, on, complete, you call back to back. It's nothing but a single. So that's what traits are. It's already encapsulating lots of features within it. So I'm just going to call it as where trait is going to be a single. So it's just checking what is the trait I'm working on, a primitive sequence type, where what is the type, single event. So this extension works like this. So like the function I created it, this is also going to be a static function, public static function, and I'm going to create something similar to create observable function, create a single, single. This is what I was trying to avoid there. Every time I had to create this, instead I'm just going to go again, pass a block over here, escaping, and this block is going to return type T itself. Like I said, chat room, if I'm parsing, it gives me a chat room. If I need to send it as a single T, then I just pass the block to this. So again I can consume this one. This is again I can just say return create I can just say it's an observable of type T dot create whatever I did right now, create observable. Okay, how do I access it? Return create observable, this function, observable has no member, create observable. Is this compiled properly? Okay, that's the reason being this is not a static function. So now this should be available. Dot create, still single trait, requires argument. Now it should be available. Create observable, passing that same block which we had passed, and I can just say it should be, why is it not giving observable type, passing a block, create observable, and then you just pass the block, and then you just say as single. So this just creates you a single. You just need to also point to the right type. So a couple of things missed. This is single trait and this is going to be observable type. So now we created a single. So this is enough. You can now go back and then we can create that simple step. Like I said, return, I can just say single type, pass the type, chat room dot, I can just say create single. I need to import the utility because it's residing in the utility, and then I said whatever block is nothing but something like this, where I am just passing whatever is inside this, and whatever inside returns you a type. So I can just say now weak self, whatever I need to do I can do within this one, self in single convert return to return type single. So we need to return something from here now. So that's what we need to implement. So the fetch messages is going to bring me like I can now call okay, before even doing all these, let's call the function, the which is happening within, I don't think we need to, because this is within Chatroom service messenger. We can call the messages http router dot fetch messages passing the chatroom id, and then I can say rx dot request using http service. So http service is already there within the chatroom's service. This is going to be the chatroom service which I'm going to use. Chatroom service is already having http service. Maybe I might have to make it internal so that it is accessible, and then I can just say http service. Yeah, now http service is ready. Response JSON. So I have the response JSON now. Now I can do a map which will transform it into the data response. So this is what we are going to parse right now. So we already have created a parser earlier, so we know what needs to be that. So I'm gonna pass that parser. You already have the response parser dot parse throwable is what we have, and then I can just pass this as single. So now no error should happen. Response parser needs to throw, so I just need to add a try over here. So all error gone. So I can even simplify this now. So this is parsing to that level. Response parser, I'm just passing. I don't need to pass anything because it identifies what is the type being received. This should be enough. Because this response parse throwable is returning something, it's just returning a type, so it's fine. So I have this map, parse it, and then I'm making it as single. I hope that's how I have implemented in every other place. Verify once. Not here. This is account service. Let's check in Chatroom service. Response parser, parse throwable, data response we are passing as single. Yeah, that's what. So whatever I created right now, it will be used. We don't need it here, but wherever we are creating, I'll show you at that place, because this is just a fetch call, and right now this is available through messages API. Now we need to have an interactor to consume this. So let's create the interactor. I'm going to call it as message interactor. Within use cases, and let's create a class message interactor public final, and init using the message service, message API, which is nothing. We can call it maybe message service, which will accept. We already have the let's connect service, so we can call the message API self dot. So let's keep a reference to it. Private let message service is message service. Now let's create the extension to fetch message interactor. I'm just gonna have a public extension function. What am I calling it? I'm gonna call it as get messages. Get messages using chatroom ID string, and it's going to return that same. Maybe I don't need to return anything because after fetching I'm going to store it somewhere over here, so I'm going to keep it as single. I need to import rxswift because of that. That's it. And then Get messages is nothing but I can just return the self.message service dot fetch messages using the ID, and then I can map it. It's going to return the chat room. I'm going to keep it here because let's check whether we are receiving the chat room or not. Initially it's going to be the chat room, and I can just print this chat room to see whether chat room messages received for ID for chat room. I can just say chat room itself. Then I'm going to return the empty void. So that's it. So you're going to, as soon as you call get messages, it's going to return the chat room over here, and then I'm going to single return nothing over here. This is just to check whether we receive it or not, but then we'll create a behavior relay or something over here and then store these messages once it is received. So first thing, let's check whether you return when you get it or not. So for wherever you are going to implement it is in the presenter, as soon as you launch this chat room messaging, we are going to load this. So I'm going to bring it over the use case, get messages using chatroom ID underscore chatroom ID, returning a single tuples get messages. Yeah, so that's enough. So it's going to ask me to include that right now. Include that. Get messages, and I need to bring that present interactor over here. So include import use cases. I don't think we have anything included over here. Let's include everything. Dependencies. I need this is what utility, wherever dependencies I have use cases. I'm also going to include the utility, 2 of these. Now I think I have option to bring everything. So let's bring the interactor. Let message interactor equal to use case factory. Did I include use case? Yeah, use case factory dot, oh, we did not include it within the use case factory. I need to include that over here. Public static let message interactor equals message interactor, passing, what is it asking for? We do have message service. So I can just pass the I think we have implemented it inside chatroom service. I can just pass that. Should compile now. Let's go back. So here is where I'm going to include it. Message interactor is available, and then I can just get the function out here. Get messages using chatroom ID. Compiles fine. Let's go back to our presenter. This is where it's going to get launched. Process, I'm going to call the use cases dot input dot fetch get messages, and then I'm going to subscribe to it. Get messages passing the chatroom ID, which is available within dependencies dot chatroom dot ID. Okay, let's do one thing. I'm going to say if let chatroom ID equals this, only then fetch. So I'm going to fetch it using the chatroom ID. Then I can map it. Map, transform. So I don't need to even map it right now because I can just subscribe to it. Dot dispose. I don't have a bag. Let's create it because as soon as I subscribe to it, it's going to get all of that message is going to get fetched in the interactor, and that's going to store everything. So I don't need, this responsibility of this layer is just to fetch it. So I'm just going to do that over here. Private let bag equals dispose bag should be fine. So now once we fetch it, it's going to trigger this fetch, and maybe we can see what goes on within the interactor, because everything is ready. We just need to fetch it over here. So let's keep a breakpoint over here. Run. Go to my maybe IPL chat room. It's bringing that. So chat room is received. Whole of that chat room comes back from the server. It has lots of messages. That's brought in. So job is done. Now the only thing that we need to do is to populate it over here. So for that, we need to include some things over here, like within the interactor I'm going to bring in a publish relay, behavior relay, which is going to capture all of that messages. So let's do that. So I'm going to stop this, and we need a behavior relay to grab this one. Private, going to call it as messages relay, because this is actually bringing all the messages. Behavior relay, for that we need to import rx relay, behavior relay of type set of message. So maybe it will ask me to implement, or is it already implemented? I need to check. Behavior relay of value initial empty. So messages, we need to import models, and let's see whether it asks me to type message does not conform to hashable. So we need to implement hashable. Let's do that. Extension message needs to implement hashable and equatable then. So both of them, let's implement message equatable. So this is just a plain thing. I can just use the earlier ones itself. It's a simple one. Hashable is like you need to have a public function called hash. There is also already a function called hash. Hashable public function hash, which accepts into hasher, inout hasher. Foundation is there. Public func hash, inout hasher. So all that we need to do then is to hasher dot combine value, which is I'm going to hash it on the ID, which is going to be the unique one maybe. So just doing that. So that's my comparable. That's my hash. Now I also need a function to do the comparison, which is like function LHS message RHS message bool. So it's just going to do LHS.id equals RHS.id comparison, and it's going to be a static function, public static function. So equatable and comparable is implemented. So now it's not going to give any error. So whatever. So now you're not going to see any duplicates. That's the reason I have kept it as set, because I don't want any duplicate entries. So set will compare and do that for us. So behavior relay is ready. Now let's create a public lazy var. Out of this behavior relay, I'm going to create an observable of set of message, and that's going to use like self.messages relay is going to get converted as an observable. I'm going to also share the last value, share last, and while connected anyone will get the last value. As soon as you connect, it's going to replay the last value which is available within messages, which is required for, let's say you go to a new screen, if it is already fetched and you want to replay that, you will get all of that back from this messages. So this is done. Now how do you consume this? We can consume this from the function callback here itself. So we have the interactor, interactor is giving us the values. Get messages is going to bring all the messages. So here we already have this $0. All that we need to do now is $0 is having all the messages. So this will map it to the messages once, and we can convert this because it's an array. We need to convert that into a set because that is what the relay will accept. And then I can do a map and then say relay message relay dot accept. This is enough. I guess this should work because now whatever subscription we had written there, we can now subscribe to this. Let's see what can happen now. So this message interactor has messages. I'm going to include this within the presenter. Go to my Chatroom presenter, and then I'm going to say within output get me all the messages. Simple as that. Messages. So now it's going to ask me to include even here. So here it's a messages. I need it as the observable. So a message interactor already has these messages right now. So simple. So you get the messages through this. All that I now need to do is to subscribe to it. Let's subscribe and see. I'm gonna say self dot use cases dot output. It's going to come through output dot messages dot subscribe dispose by bag. So I'm just going to keep a debug over here so that we see the value value coming back. Debug identifier being messages. Maybe I can just keep it as messages itself. False. Should get me all these now. Let's see. Run. Go to my IPL chat room. I think it's already fetching because it goes through first subscription, event received empty, which is like the initial value set, and then it receives the next one. Once the fetch is complete, it's all set through it. So I get all of that messages through this one. So message is received. So I guess we are at a stage where we can start binding the messages to a table view right now. We already have it. For the table view, we need to create a couple of cells for send and receive side. So that's coming up in the next episode. So I'm going to take a break right now.